God is no Luddite, and we need not be one either. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. 26 years ago, Wired magazine co-founder Kevin Kelly made a $1,000 bet with an author named Kirkpatrick Sale. The wager was about whether or not by the year 2020, society as we know it would have collapsed entirely. Well, back in 1995, Kirkpatrick Sale was known for his critique of the internet, which was just starting to overhaul daily life. His book, Rebels Against the Future, praised a group known as the Luddites. They were a group of English textile workers that opposed industrialization and often aggressively destroyed the technology that made it possible. Sale's premise was similar. Quote, if the edifice of industrial civilization does not eventually crumble as a result of a determined resistance within its very walls, it seems certain to crumble of its own accumulated excesses and instabilities within not more than a few decades, perhaps sooner, end quote. Well, that was just too much for Kelly, who was a dedicated tech optimist. He'd spent most of a decade living in remote parts of Asia before becoming the founding executive editor of Wired in 1993. That experience had given him new appreciation for both human culture and technological progress, and it led him to oppose Sale's pessimism. Quote, I saw completely vehicle-less cities, people throwing garbage in the streets, no toilets. So when people were talking about getting rid of technology, I was like, no, you have no idea. In 1995, Kelly interviewed Sale, and that's where he sprung his trap. Pulling out a check for $1,000, he wagered that in 25 years, the world wouldn't even be close to the kind of disaster that Sale had predicted. Total economic collapse, war between rich and poor nations, environmental catastrophe. And their mutual publisher would decide the winner. Well, in January of last year, the bet was finally settled. Even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was no real debate about who had won. The challenges of the modern era certainly aren't trivial, but even Sale had to agree that society had not collapsed. Kelly's interview with Sale not only makes for a fascinating read, it's a helpful springboard to think through how technology affects a Christian worldview. First, while Sale's claims seem far-fetched in hindsight, there's a voice like his in every generation. Back in the 60s, it was Paul Ehrlich in his famous book, The Population Bomb. He predicted that hundreds of millions of people would starve due to overpopulation. Ehrlich wasn't just wrong with that prediction. His ideas were disastrous, fodder for totalitarian regimes worldwide, justifying things like forced sterilization in places like Mexico, Bolivia, Indonesia, and the one-child policy in China. And that same fear continues to persist today, whether from our all-consuming climate anxiety or the misguided belief that making fewer babies can solve the world's problems. But Christians should know better. We should actively and responsibly care for the planet, but it's always our duty to resist any and every philosophy that comes at the expense of infinitely valuable human lives. And this has to be based on Christian confidence that we know how the story ends. Second, a neo-Luddite outlook assumes that it's technology, not human nature, that's responsible for the world's evils. That's a belief that's also on the rise in our day by romanticizing life of the distant past based on some idea that humanity's ancestors lived in a state of harmonious bliss with the earth and each other. That doesn't just miss the point and miss history. It encourages a kind of chaotic fight against humanity's tools while ignoring humanity's souls. It's here that we need clarity. You see, innovation hasn't ruined some idyllic past of humanity, as if that ever existed, but it also cannot deliver us an idyllic future either. As Neil Postman wrote in his excellent book, Technopoly, every technology is both a burden and a blessing, not either or, but this and that. Look, for evidence of this, we only have to look at digital communication, to this technology that can allow us to make video calls with friends on the other side of the world and can also keep us from looking our own kids in the eye tonight. According to a recent survey, 1 in 3 Americans report feeling lonely, either all the time or almost all the time. Better methods of communication can help people stay in touch, but it can't make people want to stay in touch. It can even make us too busy or too distracted to see the real needs of those around us. You see, in the broadest sense, God created humanity with the capacity to structure and organize life and to steward the world He created. We create tools to do this, and the ability to create those tools are good, and the tools are good as long as they serve those ends. There's a strong clue about this in the book of Revelation, where history, which began in a garden, culminates in one of humanity's own sociological innovations, a city. In other words, God's no Luddite, and we need not be one either. A truly Christian worldview will celebrate the beauty of innovation while also keeping a healthy skepticism about any and all claims and promises of utopia. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.